I've said before that I don't want to show pictures of mummies on this channel, but maybe I wasn't telling the whole truth. No, I'm not about to show human remains in any stage of preservation. It's just that there are two pertinent meanings of the word mummy, and one of them's quite complicated. Technically, a mummy is a corpse, human or animal, preserved through desiccation. This could be natural. If I died on the moon, I would mummify, or in a dry cave here on Earth, or if I died in a desert and had all my moisture wicked away by hot wind and dry sand. The Egyptians, famously over thousands of years, developed and perfected a method for artificial mummification. We'll talk about the processes used in full some day, but it was sophisticated and employed generations of knowledge about decomposition and how to prevent it. In short, salt and other preservatives, resin, and layers of linen wrappings. So that's the short answer to the question, what is a mummy? But it isn't necessarily the Egyptian answer. What constitutes the earthly remains of a deceased person was far more than just the desiccated husk at the centre of the bandages, placed in a coffin, placed in a sarcophagus, sealed in a tomb. What defines an ancient Egyptian mummy is its purpose, because all of that technique and ritual and artistry served an ambitious purpose: reversing death. Mummification was the cryonics of the ancient Nile, even down to the fact that it was a practice primarily performed for the benefit of the rich. In fact, mummification had one advantage over cryonics. If you're in a tank of liquid nitrogen, nobody knows how to bring you back. The Egyptians were fairly confident their efforts succeeded. Shockingly, the cure for death didn't constitute drying out the deceased and wrapping them in strips of linen. The body was but part of the whole affair. The soul, all 5 parts of it, had to be treated correctly to ensure that everything could be put back together in the afterlife. Otherwise, you're just a delicious, nameless ghost floating about, waiting to be nibbled by gruesome monstrosities. So the mummy is more than a linen-wrapped corpse, okay. So, does the mummy include the coffin? Well, by the New Kingdom, coffins had evolved to be elaborate artifacts in their own right. They were made to be human in shape, not straight-edge boxes. They were engraved, gilded, and painted to resemble an idealized version of the person within. This wasn't for any human eyes to see. The coffin was part of the magic of death reversal. It recorded a person's name, a list of offerings made on the deceased's behalf. It indicated their position in society. Through prayers written upon the coffin and images of gods, the spirit of the deceased was protected on their journey through the underworld. Through a false compartment painted upon the coffin, the spirit could enter and exit at will, and enact its own magic in the world. The eyes painted upon the coffin's face were intended to be functional and grant the departed soul the ability to see, both in this world and the next. The ancient Egyptians were more than aware that the mummification process didn't preserve the body as it was in life, and that any number of things could result in it degrading. If you're a king, you're fine with this, in theory. There are statues of you throughout the land, depictions of you on monuments, and at your funerary shrine. Any and all of these things could serve as a substitute for your physical body if you decided to manifest in the world and your physical body had degraded beyond being magically useful. But not everyone filled the kingdom with statues of themselves, so the coffin served as the first backup corpse. These things, the statues, the coffin, even the physical body, anchor the spirit to this world and serve as, I think of them as like a mould that helps the soul to keep its shape and hence its identity. So that's the mummy, the corpse and its wrappings, and the coffin that reminds the spirit what shape to take and who it was. But could it include anything else? Well, the coffin was often placed in a heavy stone sarcophagus. The Greek word sarcophagus means flesh eater because of a belief of the Greeks that limestone, the material that sarcophagi were traditionally made from, aided decomposition. But one of the Egyptian terms for it was this nebank, which literally translates as, well, commonly Egyptologists translate it as Lord of Life, but it's Lord as in owner, possessor. It's Lord as in landlord. This term, possessor of life, applies to the sarcophagus and to the deceased themselves, such as in this inscription. Using this phrase to refer to the sarcophagus implies that it too serves a mystical function beyond being a vault to store the coffin in. And there's another bit of evidence that implies this. Spirits of the deceased must breathe in the afterlife and must be able to speak. To ensure this, a ritual called the opening of the mouth was performed, wherein a priest would use a ceremonial chisel to symbolically strike open the sealed mouth of the mummy. Depending upon when in the burial process this ritual was performed, the mouth could be symbolically directly opened on the deceased themselves or upon the sarcophagus. That means there was an intrinsic magical link between the sarcophagus and its occupant, bearing in mind that later sarcophagi weren't necessarily rectangular vaults, but were, like the wooden coffins within, made to be curved into a humanoid shape. What does all this mean for us today? Well, I think as part of an ambition to make archaeology more human-centric, more respectful of the interests of those who went before us, it's important to consider what a culture regards as constituting a deceased person. For most of us in Europe, a coffin is just a box to be burned or buried in, a great way to waste money by fruitlessly donating it to the funeral industrial complex. But that hasn't been the case for every civilization. I think if you really put your mind to it, you'll see that there's nothing really very revolutionary about this concept. Think about it this way, if I took a sledgehammer to someone's headstone, there are probably those who'd say I'd done something almost as bad as unearthing the buried remains and taking a sledgehammer to those. It's not because we tend to share the same afterlife beliefs as the ancient Egyptians, but it shows that we do attribute a high degree of importance to the remains of a dead person that are not just their bodily remains. Removing a wrapped body from its coffin for a scan isn't a very destructive process. The body can be put back in, although there have been examples of human remains broken apart and destroyed by the simple process of removing it from the coffin. A prominent example is that of Tutankhamun, who had limbs removed as the mummy was removed from the coffin. In a more day-to-day sense, maybe knowing more about what the Egyptians considered to be the deceased might tell us not to put the uncoffined bodies on display. Maybe, if we really take the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians seriously, if we really respect them, it means not putting the coffins on display either. Those are pretty big questions, but hopefully I've given you something to think about. I know I'll be overthinking it for a long time to come. Thanks for watching. As a tiny channel, I have to furiously tread water against the horrors of YouTube's algorithm, so even more thanks to everyone who gives this video a thumbs up, leaves a comment, and subscribes for future videos. The guardian deities who shoo butchers away from my journeying spirit are my backers at patreon.com/armchairegypt. My appreciation of their generosity knows no bounds. Until next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, life, prosperity, and health to you all.
Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.